I'm a beer sommelier. I do a lot of training, I do a lot of writing, some broadcasting about beer. I want to kind of establish that I'm freelance. I'm not affiliated to one particular brewery or pub company, but I work for lots and lots of breweries, lots of pubcos, lots of licensees under my business name, which is Beerbelle. So I've worked in the beer industry about 30 years. It's 30 years this year. And I've been associated with the Women on Tap Festival for the last couple of years, not least because I'm Yorkshire born and bred. So today I'm going to be talking you through some fine Yorkshire beers from those folks at Roosters up in Harrogate. Now, as Rachel said, I know some of you ordered the pack, so you'll have it in front of you. Hopefully you haven't drunk all the beers yet. If you don't have the Roosters beers, do not worry, because what I'm going to do is go through the characteristics and the styles of the beers in the pack. And then after each beer, I'll say, if you think you like the sound of that type of beer, here are some more recommendations that you can try. And as Rachel said, we're going to send you a kind of a crib sheet out after this session. So don't worry about writing the beers down. Don't worry about writing the food pairings down. We're going to send you all that information anyway. What I would say is, if you're going to order some beers after this session, or you're thinking about buying some beers for the weekend, try and support your local breweries, because they've been one of the hardest hit sectors of the hospitality sector, and we really need to support local at this moment. So I've tried to pick beers that are coming from a lot of Yorkshire breweries. If you can't get them, just go into an online retailer and they should be able to get them for you. So are we all thirsty? Just give me a big nod. Yeah? Okay, so we're going to grab a beer and we're going to kick off. Not in that way, we're just going to kick off this session. So, first beer that we're going to try is the Roosters Pilsner. Now I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can all see it. I have to admit that I'm what we call in Yorkshire cack-handed. So if I hold the beer like that, you cannot even see the branding on it. So I'm going to have to hold it with my right hand, which feels really, really unusual for me. And what I'd like you to do with whatever beer you've got at the moment, I want you to pour it into a glass. So when we're tasting beer, got my Roosters glass here. When we're tasting beer, I want you to use all your senses. So I want you to use your eyes, I want you to use your nose, and I also want you to use your mouth. So if I look at the colour of that beer, the one word I always avoid when I'm doing training is the word brown. I think it's the most negative word in the English language. So when I try and describe colours of beer, I use a bit of flowery language. So I'll call it mahogany, or amber, or straw-coloured, or lemon, or even sunshine in a glass. So as we go through the beers, just kind of have a look at the colour, because as soon as you look at the colour of a beer, you start making up your mind about what you think it's going to taste like. Now, I said, use your nose, have a good sniff of the beer before you try it. 80% of what you taste comes through what you smell. And that's why when you've got a cold, you can't taste your food properly. And it's why I said, pour the beer into a glass, because if you drink beer out of a can or a bottle, you lose 80% of what you're tasting straight away. So that's the reason I said pour it out. So this beer, Roosters Pilsner, is 4.8%, and it's a Pilsner Pale Ale hybrid. So the reason I'm looking down, by the way, is I've had to make some notes here as I've been trying the beers, because otherwise I'll just ramble at you for an hour. Got a straw-coloured beer. If you have a smell of it, you've got a really lovely, fresh, grassy, herbal, citrusy aroma. And grassiness is really, really important in Pilsners. That's coming from the noble hops in the beer. What I mean by noble hops is hops that have been grown for hundreds of years in countries like the Czech Republic, Germany, and England. And this has got some Czech hops in there. Czech hops are always, the dominant aroma is grassiness, and then you get a bit of floral and a little bit of pepperiness. So I'm going to get this out there. This is a Pilsner Pale Ale hybrid. So essentially it's I'm going to use the lager word, the L word. And people get quite snobby about lagers because they think about mainstream lagers, and yet lager is one of the hardest beers in the world to produce. Pilsner is a sub-style of the lager family. And if anyone said to you, well, what's the difference between a mainstream lager and a Pilsner? Just the way to describe it is to say it's lager turned up to number 11. You've got a huge amount more flavour. You've got a big kind of aftertaste with Pilsners. Right, I'm going to have a slurp of this beer now. I have tasted it before, but cheers, bottoms up, everyone. Right, so one of the things that beer tasters never do is they never spit beer out. Like wine tasters do, because to get the full profile of that beer, you need to get it right near the back of your mouth and down the sides of your tongue. Now, what you'll get with what you might get with this one is you get a backbone of breadiness, and that's coming from the Yorkshire soft water. I love the fact that Roosters have put on all of their cans on the ingredients that it's brewed with soft Yorkshire water. And then because this beer is brewed with an ale yeast rather than a lager yeast, you're going to get some really kind of fruity flavours coming through. So you get the fruitiness of the ale, and then you get the kind of clean, crisp taste of a lager. Now, I tasted this beer earlier, and I thought, right, if I was going to put it with any food, if I was going to make a supper tonight, what would I drink with, or what would I eat with this beer? So I don't want anything too heavy, so I'd go for something like chicken Caesar salad. Pilsners go brilliantly with sushi. So sushi or smoked salmon. Pilsners love things like asparagus with poached eggs, and asparagus is in season at the moment. Avocado on toast would be a great one to go with this beer. Now, I presume I've got a few cheese heads out there, people who are absolutely nuts about cheese. I love pairing beers with cheese. The type of cheese I put with Pilsner is an Alpine cheese, something like Emmental or Gruyere, because it's really nice and nutty, and it will go with the breadiness of the beer. So other beer styles that I've tried that I think, right, that sits kind of within that style, and it's really lovely and refreshing for a day like today. I'll read them out. Like I say, we're going to send you these recommendations. Number 1, Vacation Brewery from Hebden Bridge. They do a beer called Dirty Pilsner, well worth trying. 4 Pure do a Pilsner called Base Camp Pils. Lost and Grounded Brewery do Running with Sceptres, which is a brilliant hybrid. And finally, a local one from North Brewing Co. in Leeds. They brew a beer called Herzog, which is fantastic with the foods that I've just recommended. Could I just ask you, can you go to your reactions at the bottom of your screen? And if you click on that, you'll either get a thumbs up or a clap. If you like that beer, if you like Pilsners, will you just do a click on the thumbs up for me? And Rachel can have a look how many people like Pilsners. Everyone found that? Oh, fantastic.
We've got quite a lot of fans there, quite a lot of fans.
Loads of thumbs up. Different colour thumbs up as well. Okay. So when Rachel sent the email out to you earlier, I hope she put on it that kind of you might need more than one glass, because even I would struggle to get through all 6 beers in an hour-long tasting. So I've got a little selection of glassware here. Don't worry if you want to just carry on drinking your Pilsner, but I'm going to go on to beer number 2 in the Roosters pack. So beer number 2, and I'm doing these in a particular order, is Echo Chamber. Ooh, can you all see that? Trying to do this with my right hand. So Echo Chamber is a 4.5% beer, and it's an extra pale ale. I'm going to get my little posh glass out here and pour some of this beer into it. So pale ales, it's a bit of a generic term for lots of sub-styles. So you've got India pale ales, you've got bitters, you've got American pale ales, you've got New England IPLs, ESBs, and it goes on and on. But basically, as a pale ale as a style, originated as almost a catch-all term for any beer, any top fermented beer that wasn't dark. And up until the 18th century in England, the bulk of beers that we brewed and drank were they were dark brown because they were brewed from amber malts and dark malts. The few beers that we brewed with paler malts, we just called them pale ale to distinguish from darker beers. But there's a kind of real, there's an absolute myriad of flavours that go into different pale ales. And the colour can go from honey to copper to quite dark. So if I give you an example, I'm pretty certain most of you will be familiar with a beer called Timothy Taylor's Landlord. Timothy Taylor's Landlord is a pale ale, but for any of you who drink it, you will know that it's actually dark copper coloured when you pour it out. It's still classified as a pale ale because of the flavour characteristics in it. Now, if I give you kind of a little bit of history around pale ale, most famous brewing town in the world, without a shadow of a doubt, is Burton-upon-Trent in the Midlands. And this was the home of pale ale in the 19th century, and a lot of it was to do with the quality of the water. The 30-mile radius around Burton-upon-Trent, the water is really, really special. And around the time, kind of mid-18th century, this country went from being an agricultural nation to an industrial nation. So we had lots and lots of advances in technology and science and politics. Because of the advances in technology, we learned how to control the brewing process and control the colour of beer a lot better than we had done before. Now, I say Burton-on-Trent was really the heartland of pale ales because the water in Burton is very special. It has a very high level of a mineral called calcium sulfate, or otherwise known as gypsum. The reason that that water is brilliant for brewing with is when you brew with water with a high level of gypsum, you manage to extract loads more fermentable sugars from the grain that you're brewing with. So basically you get more beer for your buck. I'm looking down at my notes because I've rambled there a little bit. Right, so on to your beer. What I want you to do, stick your nose in this beer, give it a swill round, have a smell, and you're going to get some really distinctive aromas with this because this beer is brewed with a hop called Nelson Sauvin from New Zealand. It's incredible hop because what this does is it gives marvellous aromas like gooseberry. You're definitely going to get a bit of grapefruit in there, just like you chopped a grapefruit in half. You might get a little bit of melon coming through there if you're kind of a super smeller. Nelson Sauvin is, as the name suggests, this beer will smell like a really cracking Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. So when you take a sip of this beer, remind you of the name again, Echo Chamber, you really get that grapefruit bitterness coming through really forward. But it's an extra pale ale. So what you get after you've swallowed your first mouthful is you start tasting some of the sweetness of the malt. That's a sign of a really good pale ale. You want it to be very, very balanced between hop bitterness and sweetness of malt. You don't want one flavour to dominate the other. So you get that hit of bitterness right at the beginning, sweetness through, and then it's got an incredibly dry finish on it. So again, when I tried the beers earlier, I thought, right, if I was making supper tonight, what would I do with this? And I thought, right, Southeast Asian, we're going to go with some Thai food with this one. So Thai or Vietnamese, and I'm not meaning those kind of coconut heavy curries, I mean really fresh flavours. So something like pad Thai or pho, loads of fresh chilli, coriander, squeeze of lime juice, and it will really complement the bitterness in that beer, that grapefruity bitterness. Equally, this will go great with fish and chips. And I don't know whether you've got a local chippy that's still open. If you have, go and get some fish and chips, get another can of Echo Chamber and try it with it. Our local chippy here has only just opened up in the last few days. And honestly, it was like crowd scenes from Ben this weekend, because people were just queuing outside. They were mad for the fish and chips. Right, for you cheese lovers amongst you, I want you to go for a really nice creamy cheese, so those hops cut through the creaminess of the cheese. Something like a nice ripe brie or a camembert, or it works with good old Dairy triangles. That's really classy, isn't it? Dairy triangles. If I was in a pub and I wanted a pub snack to go with this, I'm going to choose some scampi fries, but I know scampi fries aren't to everybody's taste. If you don't like scampi fries, have this style of beer with a packet of prawn cocktail skips. Works really, really well. And I've just remembered that I didn't give you a pub snack to go with our first beer, which was Pilsner. Try Pilsner with cashew nuts. Cashew nuts are really, really creamy, and they absolutely complement lagers and Pilsners. So other beers that I would say, if you like pale ales, extra pale ales, Salt Beer Factory in Saltaire make a beer called Jute, which is excellent. Magic Rock in Huddersfield have a beer called Inhaler. And I'm going to give a shout out as well to another beer from Roosters, which some of you may have tried before because it's one of their classics. It's a beer called Yankee. And if you see Yankee on cask when the pubs reopen, I would seriously recommend you try it. When I was running pubs 20 years ago or so, I knew if I put a barrel of Yankee on the bar at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, it will be gone by 7 o'clock, 72 pints straight away, because it is such a cracking, sessionable pale ale. So, Jute, Yankee, Inhaler. I'm going to take a deep breath for a second and just go back to Rachel and see if there have been any questions that have come through that I need to answer.
Well, no, I've not seen any. There's lots of nice comments, which is lovely. Lots of love for cheese. But I've got a question. Is Dairy cheese?
You know what? It tastes like cheese to me. I don't care what it's made of.
Good enough. Good enough. It'll do.
A bit old school is Dairy, isn't it? And I'm seeing...
There was a few people trying to justify when you were talking about having the Pilsner with eggs, trying to rationale having it for breakfast, which I'm steering them away from. But, brunch maybe. Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah, we did do the drink responsibly and all that business, did we?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, we don't even know what day of the week it is, never mind what time of the day at the moment. And I've just seen a very interesting comment from Andy and Fiona that says Yankee is dog heroin. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that.
Andy, you're unmuted if you want to explain.
So Dairy is dog heroin.
Oh, Dairy Lily.
Dairy is
not
dog.
Yankee.
Yeah. It was
I'll add one to you, Andy. Dairy and peanut butter for dogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially one of the at the moment.
You're not giving that dog any beer, are you?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so for those of you who tried Echo Chamber, can we have a thumbs up if you like that beer? That's thumbs down there.
I feel like there's not as many thumbs up for this one as there was for the Pilsner.
Okay, well, tell you what we'll do. We'll take a bit of what I call an anorak break before we go on to the 24/7. I know someone's dying for 24/7 because they've nearly drunk it all, but bear with me. Right, ingredients in beer. We've got grain. 90% of the world's brewers brew beer with barley because we can plant 2 crops of barley a year. We've got hops, we've got water, we've got yeast. So I'm going to give you some good news stories here. Okay, so barley is where we get body, colour, flavour, aroma, and foam in beer. If you just brew beer with barley from the field, it's not going to work. You've got to take it through a process whereby you harvest the barley, you allow it to germinate in a very warm, moist environment. What happens is all the starch in the barley converts into sugar. That's what a brewery is after. So as soon as the barley germinates, you kill it, and you kill it by heating it. So if you want to make a very pale beer, just kind of toast it lightly. If you want to make a darker malted beer, you apply a bit more heat. It's a little bit like making toast. So good news about malted barley in beer is every grain of barley that we brew with has got a tiny little amount of a compound called silica, naturally occurring silica. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that silica is good for us as humans. It gives us healthy hair, healthy nails, healthy skin, and it improves bone density. And I'm going to come back to hair now. My great grandma used to tell my mum that if you wash your hair in beer, it makes your hair shine. There is 100% truth in that, and it's the silica in beer which causes it. Although I've got to admit, I'd much rather drink the beer than wash my hair in it. Right, hops. Hops are like fresh herbs that you put in a casserole or a stew. So using fresh hops, really, really important. They are distantly related to the cannabis family, but without the psychoactive element in them. What they do is they add aroma, they add bitterness, they add, again, they aid foam, but they've got antibacterial properties. So the more hops you put in a beer, the longer it's going to last. Hop oil's been used for medicinal purposes for years and years. The main thing that hop oil is used to treat is sleep disorders. So if you look on the pack of any herbal sleeping tablets, like Nitol, the key ingredient is hop extract. People sleep with hop pillows because it just relaxes you, it makes you feel less anxious, helps you get a good night's sleep. Right, yeast. Right, Latin name for yeast is Saccharomyces. Literally, it's translated as sugar-eating fungus. What yeast does is it gobbles up all that sugar that we get from the malted barley and converts it into alcohol and carbon dioxide, fizz. Now, we've got three families of yeast when we're brewing. We've got ale yeast, which loves warm temperatures. It's very busy yeast. You can make an ale quite fast, and it lies on the top of the fermenting vessels. Lager yeast is quite lazy. Lager yeast only likes really cold, chilled out temperatures, and it takes quite a long time to make a true continental lager. Goes to the bottom of the fermenting vessels. And then we've got the maverick, we've got wild yeast strains, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later. So I've mentioned the goodness in hops, goodness in barley. Where does spent yeast go? It goes to the Marmite factory. And Marmite, as you probably know, is very rich in vitamin B complex, which again helps your muscles and it helps your bones and your teeth. Last but not least, all beers, typically a beer is made up of between 85 and 95% water. So we could quite realistically argue that beer is hydrating. We've got lovely soft Yorkshire water around here, great for making pale ales and lagers. If I was across in Dublin, I know we've got one of the participants, Francesca's calling in from Dublin, very, very hard water over there. Brilliant for making stouts and porters, just gives them a really dry edge. And finally, before we go on to our third beer, anyone who tells you that beer is bad for you or it's fattening, they are talking absolute rubbish. All beer is made from natural ingredients, and those first two beers that we tried, half a pint of those beers have less calories in them than a small glass of white wine. And the reason that we associate beer with big bellies or weight gain is usually about lifestyle. You go out and you drink 5 pints of beer a night and then have a kebab after it, and you do that regularly, you're going to put weight on. But you would if you drank 5 glasses of white wine or 5 glasses of, I don't know, red wine, and then went and had that kebab. So it's all about in moderation. But beer in itself is not a fattening drink. Right, I'll get down off my soapbox now about that. We'll have another beer. So the next beer that I'm going to go on to is a beer called 24/7. Comes in at 4.7%, and it is a session IPA. So one of my glasses, pour a wee bit of this beer into there. Okay, 24/7. The reason it's called a session IPA is because historically or traditionally, most IPAs were above, kind of north of 6.5%. So this is a bit lower, 4.7%. And it pours a golden kind of amber colour, if you can see that in my glass there. Do you know what? When I tasted this beer earlier, I thought, I cannot come up with a better descriptor than the one that's written on the can. And I wrote this down. Okay. The Roosters Brewing Company say this is a punch bowl aroma of lemon, tangerine and gooseberry, followed by grapefruit. And I thought, what a great word to use for aromas, a punch bowl of aroma. So if any of the Roosters gang are on this call tonight, I'm going to pinch that. I'm going to use that word, punch bowl. So if you take a smell of this beer, your grapefruit and your citrus aromas are coming from Amarillo, Chinook and Simcoe hops. Gooseberries still coming from Nelson Sauvin. This beer contains all 4 of those hops. Now, you smell the beer and you think, do you know what? My sense of smell is waning a bit. I can't quite pick up the gooseberry, or I can't quite pick up that citrusy aroma. It's because once you smell beers a few times, you start going nose blind. It happens to everyone. And what you need to do is you need to reset your nose. And beer tasters have got a little bit of a trick that if they feel they're not picking out particular aromas correctly, what they do is they smell their own skin. So if you smell the back of your hand, my hands are like sawdust at the moment, smell the back of your hand and then go back to the beer, probably going to be a lot more powerful. And you can do that as many times as you want just to reset your nose. It's quite funny watching you all do that. It's not a trick. Right, on to the taste. Right, this is way more hop forward than the extra pale ale that we tried before. It's quite juicy, it's quite tangy, it's pithy. It's a little bit like an alcoholic umbongo, for those of you that remember umbongo. So it's quite a sunshiny beer. It's very tropical beer. This would be a perfect beer for drinking in the garden on a day like today. Once you swallowed it, again, what you're going to get is you're going to get some of that sweetness coming through from the malt. And what the malt's doing is it's kind of almost in the background, and it's showcasing all those really, really brilliant hops. Now, what came across with this beer to me earlier on today, it was how fresh it tasted. And I had a look at the best before date on the bottom of the can. The best before date was April 2021. One of the things I always do whenever I'm buying a beer from a bottle shop or from a supermarket or the off license is I check out the date on it. Because from the moment a beer leaves the brewery gates, its freshness deteriorates just tiny bits every day. So when you're buying beer, just have a look and pick the ones with the longest best before dates on, because you know it's going to be the freshest. It's going to be it will just have been delivered. Particularly with the beers like IPAs, styles like IPAs, you start losing that hop zinginess in them, and they start tasting a little bit flabby the nearer they get to the best before date. So what am I going to make, or what I'm going to eat with a beer like this in my hand? I'm going to go with Mexican food. So I'm going to go with things like fajitas or burritos. What's the other one that I put down? Enchiladas, but also with a big dollop of guacamole, because you want that creaminess of the guacamole with a zing of lime juice. IPAs love guacamole. Another good recommendation would be chicken satay with a peanut sauce. Those zingy hops are going to kind of cut through the spices in satay. And I've got a specific cheese in mind for this one, cheese that I really love, and it's Wensleydale. Wensleydale is a little bit sour, and it's a little bit tangy, and a little bit crumbly. And the way we eat it in Yorkshire, or the way my mum eats it, is she always has Wensleydale cheese with a big slab of fruitcake. And it works really, really well. So fruitcake, Wensleydale, and this beer. If I was drinking this beer in a pub, I know exactly what crisp I'd have with it, or what snack I'd have with it. I'd go for a packet of Worcestershire sauce French fries, the Walker's French fries. And again, it's that kind of slight tanginess and a slight spice on Worcestershire sauce, which goes really well with the session IPA. What do you think, guys? Is it a thumbs up for this one? Okay, fair few thumbs up. I know someone had nearly finished this one before we even started. We've got a really interesting comment in from Francesca, who's over in Ireland. Francesca's also a beer sommelier. She's put a comment that ideally beers also declare their brewed on date, and then you really know its age. That's a really good tip. And from Kat and Jimmy, darker beers and strong beers age well. Hops don't last all that long. Excuse me whilst I cough. Again, really interesting point. There are some beers that are brewed to be aged, and their flavours will develop. It's almost like kind of keeping a fruit cake or a Christmas pudding for a long time. A classic one is Fuller's Vintage Ale, that they release a limited amount every Christmas with a different hop variety in it. It's a very strong beer. I think it's usually about 8.5%. A recommendation with, if you're going to buy beers to age, like barley wines, is that you buy 2 bottles. Drink 1 bottle fresh, and then put 1 bottle in a dark place, ideally somewhere like your garden shed. Don't keep it in the fridge. Keep it in an upright position, and then try it in a year's time. And you'll find that you've got a completely different beer. I've heard of people buying Fuller's Vintage Ale and saving it for when they have their first child, or when their first child gets married, or a special birthday like their child's 18th birthday. But barley wines and stronger beers can be aged. We've got Daryl saying he's got a Fuller's 2010, so I'm coming round to your house afterwards. What else? Any other comments on that? And someone remembered, David, you remembered the Umbongo song, They Drink It in the Congo. Okay, I've got ahead of myself a little bit. Other beers within this session IPA style, if you want some recommendations for the brands. Some of you will have tried White Rat from the guys behind Ostick Brewery. The brilliant 4% beer, but drinks like a 6% beer. Northern Monk from Leeds, Eternal Session IPA. And Ilkley All Day Pale Ale. 3 great beers. Just to let you know, all of these beers that I'm recommending, and they'll come out on your crib sheet, I've gone onto all of their websites and made sure that you can order them online, and these beers are in stock. So it's not as though I'm kind of sending on a wild goose chase with some of these beers. Right, time to bring out the big guns. And we are going to move on to an IPA, and this is Ripple Effect, which is a 7.4% collaboration beer. It was brewed in collaboration with North Brewing Company in Leeds. So that 7.4% is more true to its historical roots of an IPA. Just kind of, I'm going to go into why we've kind of got used to IPAs that are weak and just brown and bitter a little bit later. So within the scope of this event this evening, it will be impossible for me to kind of go right down into the roots of how IPA originated. What I will do is I'll give you a potted history and then a recommendation for a beer historian who's written more about IPAs than anyone else I know. This style of beer changed the drinking habits, not just of our country, but the entire world. And remember what I said about the reason that pale ales are called pale ales is because they were just paler in contrast to most of the darker beers that we were drinking up until the 18th century, 18th and 19th century. Well, during this period in history, kind of 1800s, we had a lot of the armed forces, the military, who were sent out to work in the colonies. And basically these men had two choices. They could drink the local brew, which was usually quite dangerous because it was very, very strong, might end up killing you. Or they still had a taste for dark beers, so things like porters and milds and stouts. But darker beers became associated with people in the lower ranks of the army. So paler beers were the domain of the gentry and the commanding officers. They wanted to differentiate themselves by drinking something different. So they chose to drink stronger, paler ales. And this is where we started kind of developing pale ales into IPAs. In the couple of brewers, George Hodgson and Samuel Alsop, discovered that if you pack a beer full of hops, you're going to use those antibacterial properties to preserve the beer for longer. Remember, these beers had to go on a long sea journey across the colonies. And also, if you dial up the ABV, the alcohol level in a beer, that also helps preserve it. So this pale ale, it was originally called East India Pale Ale, shipped out to the colonies. Other countries in the world got to hear about it. So it became the world's most widely distributed style of beer. Started in this country though. And we started pouring it in British drinking dens, and a fan base was born. So as I say, traditional historical IPAs would be pouring at about 7.5%. Just gonna have a sniff of this beer. I love the smell of this beer. Now, what happened throughout the 20th century to IPA in the UK is just a masterclass in history. Three things happened. You have got to use lots and lots of hops, and you also have to up your grain bill in an IPA. Now, we went through two large-scale world conflicts, First World War, Second World War, which meant there was a shortage of ingredients. So brewers started turning down the amount of ingredients in IPAs. And then at the start of the 20th century, the temperance movement in the UK was huge. They thought all alcohol was evil. And we came so close to prohibition in the UK about 1918, 1919. So what the brewers did was they went they liaised with the temperance movement, and they said, do you know what, if we stop brewing IPAs at 7.5% and we take the ABV down, will he be happy? And the temperance movement said, well, strong alcohol is extremely evil. This is a little bit less evil. Those two facts, in combination with the fact that the government at the time started putting a preposterous amount of tax and duty on high-strength beers, caused a lot of brewers to say, nah, we're not going to brew IPAs like we did throughout the 19th century. We're going to start dumbing them down a little bit. Which is why I will go into a pub and I'll see a pump clip and I won't name any brands, but it'll say IPA 3.6%. I think that's not an IPA. It's brown, it's quite weak, it's a little bit bitter, it's just a malted beverage, really. And the reason we've seen a big resurgence in IPAs in the UK is throughout the 1970s and the 1980s, there was a massive revolution in home brewing in the United States. And they didn't have English hops to make a traditional English IPA, but they said, right, the Brits have got this brilliant recipe for a beer. It's really strong. Let's use our hops. Let's use our hops from the Yakima Valley. And these hops were very different to British hops. They were kind of loaded with grapefruit and pine and citrus. And there was one particular hop which changed the whole IPA category. It was called Cascade. Now, Cascade is in ripple effect. You're going to get a huge, powerful hit of grapefruit in this one. You may also, all you super smellers out there, take another sniff. It's got some hints of lychee in it as well. If you know what lychees smell like. It's also got a little bit of, it's a bit flowery, a little bit floral. I heard another taster on another session I went to, and this taster said, oh, I've got geranium in here. I don't quite get geranium, but I'll go with it. So again, it pours a kind of dark gold colour. That grapefruit just leaches from the glass. Taste this beer. And this is massive. It's bold, it's juicy. Clearly somebody had a lot of fun putting this together and a lot of fun drinking it afterwards. If you know the guys from Roosters and if you know the guy from North Brewing Company, they'd have had a lot of fun anyway, wouldn't they? And despite the strength of this beer, my opinion is that is eminently drinkable. And I would say if Roosters have still got any of the ripple effect in stock, go and buy some more of this. I'd urge you to do it as well because you're going to be doing some good by buying this beer. A lot of the profits from this beer are going towards Brew Gooder, which is a charitable foundation which helps parts of the world which don't have clean drinking water to get access to clean water. Now, with the last three beers, what I did was I said, right, what I want you to do is think about food. So we had a few food matches, and then I said, right, let's have a look at some of the brands within the style. I'm going to kind of go a bit off course with this one because this is an IPA. This is Ripple Effects. I want to try our next beer, which is Double Assassin. You can all see that. Double Assassin, which is an 8% double IPA. So you can tell the differences between an IPA and a double IPA. Let me get a clean glass. Right, so Double Assassin. Babyface Assassin is on my top 10 list of desert island beers. It is a cracking beer from Roosters. Whenever I see it in a pub, it's always the beer that I kind of think, yeah, I'm going to have a can of that, or I'm going to have that on draft. I love the aroma on this beer. You've got mango, apricot, our old friend grapefruit again, and a little bit of mandarin orange. It almost goes into like kind of a juicy marmalade aroma. And the reason I asked you if you've got the beers to try these side by side is we're getting the complexity of different hop varieties in Ripple Effect, but in Double Assassin, they are only using one hop. And that hop, which you've probably all heard of, is Citra. And Citra is a bit of a new kid on the block in the beer world. It's only been around since 2009. And it's got a really exotic, citrusy aroma to it. Like I said, it's really complex. But it's got some black currant notes in it. When you taste this beer, you get a little bit of black currant coming through. And that's why the Brits love Citra, because a lot of British hops, they will have that kind of autumn fruits flavour behind them. Very wintry flavours. Just to let you know, Citra was the result of a crossbreeding programme in Washington's Yakima Valley. And in 1992, they took one hop plant, they kind of crossbred it, and they planted it, and it took 16 years for this hop to be available commercially. When they first planted the hop groves commercially, they only planted 6 acres of it. It's now one of the most popular and sought after hops in the world. So what I want you to do is try your Ripple Effect. And once you've done that one, go to Double Assassin. And what I'm trying to get across to you is how refined Double Assassin actually tastes. That is like a fine wine of the beer world. At 8%, it's not a necking, but some of you may disagree with me on this, but I wouldn't be necking 5 of those on a night time because I'm definitely having my beer goggles on. I'd want that served in a really nice glass. I'd probably only want half a pint of it at a time. And that's kind of backed up by something that is printed on every one of these cans from Roosters. And it's printed drink quality, not quantity. And what I'm going to do food-wise with this is I'm going to suggest 2 things because both of these dishes will go well with both of these beers. It's really, really simple. I would have the best toasted cheese sandwich, make it with brown bread, because brown bread is quite sweet and it'll bring out the maltiness in the beer. Get a mature vintage, the richest cheddar you can get, toasted cheese sandwich, bit of whole grain mustard on the side. If you're a carnivore, if you think, oh, I'm going to have meat with this, go for strong flavoured charcuterie. So things like serrano ham, copper, prosciutto, and a trick that I learned, another trick, I went out to Italy last year, and I love kind of charcuterie. I love meat and cheese platters. And with the charcuterie, they were drizzling local honey on the meat. And when you try that with a beer like an IPA, what it does is it just tones down some of the real bitterness in that beer. So honey, meat, and a double IPA. If I was drinking this in the pub, I'm going to go with McCoy's deep ridge or ridge cut cheddar and onion crisps. I want a really strong flavour crisp with that. If you like this kind of heavy beer style, this real heavy hitter, 3 recommendations. Magic Rock Cannonball, again from Huddersfield. Another one from Salt Beer Factory in Saltaire is called These Things I Believe. If you haven't tried it, they have got it in stock at the moment. And one from outside our area, Thornbridge Brewery Halcyon, which is quite widely available in supermarkets as well as in their online shop. I'm just going to have a look on the message board. Rachel, have you spotted anything that I need to answer?
I'm scribbling a few notes. Someone was asking about, I think we've got someone from Roosters on here, about ripple effect, whether it's a one-off or whether it's going to be a, I don't know if we might know. Anyway, it's really a popular beer that might want to be a thing for people. And it was just going back to the aging of beer. We were just asked about some beer improving with age.
Okay, so aged beers, like I say, I recommended Fuller's Vintage Ale. You will find a lot of barley wines. So JW Lee's over in Manchester, they do a limited production of a beer called Harvest Ale every year. And it's dated. That's one that improves the longer you keep it. A lot of Belgian Trappist beers age very, very well. They're strong. Like I say, keep them in the dark, keep them in a shed. If you want to know if it's a Trappist beer, when you go to a bottle shop, look for the hexagon symbol on the label and it will say ATP, Authentic Trappist Product. And those beers will age brilliantly. I'm just looking at some of the latest comments. Eileen's put the Snackingham ham is pretty good with the double assassin. I'm afraid, Eileen, that as soon as my beer pack came through, I ate all the crisps and snacks in it before I even tried the beers, but good recommendation there. Francesca again has made a point about glassware for beer. Those of you, I know a few people who were on this call today, you'll know I've got a really big thing about glassware, that we're the only country really in the world that constantly talks about beer in pints. We'll go, can I have a pint of beer? And it's off-putting for a lot of people. Whereas if you change that word pint for the word glass, would you like a glass of beer? Changes your perception of the product straight away. We've got to get away from using the word pint all the time, which you might have just kind of read my thoughts, because my last beer, I'm bringing out a champagne flute for this one, and it is fine to kind of serve beer in wine glasses, in stemmed glasses. It just premiumises the beer a little bit, especially when you've paid a lot for it. Right, I've got so many beers in front of me now. I'm going to have a fun old night after this is all over. We're coming to the end of the session, and I want to wind it down a bit from the full kind of sensory explosion of those last two beers. I have a bit of a rule of thumb when I'm judging whether a beer is good. And this is just kind of, this is not guidelines, rules, or anything like that. It's just some food for thought. When I'm trying a beer for the first time, first thing I try and check is the beer balanced? If it's just hop juice or it's a malted beverage, that's not a balanced beer. I wouldn't say that was great. Number two is try and imagine, will this beer still be around in 100 years' time? Or is it just pandering to current trends? And if it's kind of a fashion of the moment, it's not going to survive the test of time. Number three, this is the real acid test, is when I'm trying a beer for the first time, I'm always thinking, would I buy a second one of these? And if I buy a second one, I know that it's an outstanding beer. So if you kind of keep that in mind when you're trying beers for the first time, is it balanced? Is it still going to be around in 100 years? And would you pay money for a second one? So we're going to finish on a speciality. So our speciality is One Trick Pony, which is actually our lowest strength beer today. It's a 4.1% rose lemonade sour. And I am going to pour it into a champagne flute. So this beer really demonstrates how innovative and creative our brewing industry has become. We've become very experimental, brewing with different ingredients. This is a sour beer infused with rose, I've got to read this bit, rose lemonade herbal tea from Taylor's of Harrogate. It has got the most gorgeous pink hue to it. I think if I served this beer to a group of non-beer drinkers or people who go, oh no, I don't drink beer, they would almost dispute it was a beer because their mindset is that all beer is brown and bitter. This is a classic example of how we can get such a massive range of flavours from beer. So when I smell this, I do get a little bit of rose, a little bit like Turkish Delight. But then when I sniffed it again, I thought, you know what, I can smell marshmallows in this one. It's kind of got a really sweet aroma to it. And this is where our eyes and our nose can absolutely deceive what we're going to taste next. So have a swig of this beer. And it's got a sharp, mouth-watering, kind of puckering sourness. And sourness is not usually a word that we want to associate with beer. I bet you've all been in a pub and been served a beer and you've tasted it and you think, God, that's like Sarson's vinegar. And you know that it's not right. This is sour in the way that natural yogurt is sour. It's sour in the way that balsamic vinegar is sour. It's good bacteria, it's good wild yeast in there. So this beer would be a great beer as an aperitif, a summer garden party, at a barbecue out in the garden. It's a great alternative to some of the drinks that we kind of automatically plump for, such as champagne, prosecco, or sweet sticky Pims in summertime. So as I say, it's only 4.1%. When you have a taste of it, you've got that sourness, but you have got a little bit of Turkish Delight going on. And it kind of scrambles your brain because you weren't expecting that at all. A lot of sour beers do that. You anticipate one thing with your eyes, then you taste it and you go, that has messed with my head completely. Sour beers are amazing with food. Think of the beer a little bit like a vinaigrette dressing. So if you love chicken liver pate, that beer will be smashing with it. If you're a cheesehead, goat's cheese. Think about what we sometimes drizzle on goat's cheese. We'll put a raspberry vinaigrette because we know that the sourness of the raspberry vinaigrette offsets the saltiness of the cheese. I'm going to be really common here. If I was in a pub, I would have this with some pork scratchings because they would more than match up to the sourness. Again, so you've got the saltiness of the pork scratchings. I would also say beautiful with a bit of dark chocolate. It's the first sweet thing I've mentioned tonight. So if you like this beer, it was quite hard to find local with this. Bacchus Creek is a lambic cherry sour beer. It's available in most supermarkets. Be sure to have some dark chocolate on hand if you get hold of Bacchus Creek, because you'll get Black Forest Gateau going on your tongue. If you like balsamic, Rodenbach Grand Cru is a sour brown ale. It's quite challenging, but if you like this, you'll like Rodenbach. And one from the UK is Wild Beer Co. down in Bristol, make a beer called Modus Operandi. Again, I've checked that they've got it in stock. It's available at the moment. So I'm looking at the clock on my computer. We've just done a whistle-stop tour of 6 beers, and there are literally hundreds of styles. We could stay on here a week and do this. I'm going to end with a few calls to action, and this isn't hard work at all. During this time that we're living in, use the time to experiment a little bit, because we tend to always stick with what we're used to. So what I'd recommend is go out of your comfort zone with your beers and go, do you know what? I'd never have thought of trying anything like that. And put any preconceptions aside about what you think you might not like. Second thing is experiment with a bit of food and beer matching. We're all being a bit more creative in the kitchen at the moment. So try reaching for a beer to go with your supper. If it doesn't work or it clashes horribly, and don't worry, put it down to experience. You haven't broken the bank. You haven't bought a 20 grand bottle of wine. If I have actually got next to me my Bible, and I'm going to hold it up to my camera. This is a book called The Brewmaster's Table by Garrett Oliver. I've had this copy 15 years, and I dip into it at least 3 times a week, thinking, wonder what beer would go with that? What food should I put with this beer? It's fabulous. Try and support local breweries as much as you can, not just during this period, but going forward. They are going to need us. As I said, you're all going to get some notes to accompany this session. At the bottom of the notes, I've put my contact details, my email address, my Twitter handle, and my website. If you've got any questions, just email me or contact me, and I'll endeavour to get back to you as quickly as possible. Even if you think on Saturday night, do you know what? We're going to have this for supper. I wonder what beer to put with it. Drop Annabel a line on it. And finally, throughout Women on Tap Festival, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but they are aiming to raise £1,000 for refuge. And the organisers have set up a Just Giving page. If everyone who took part in one of these Women on Tap events just contributed a little bit, we can smash that £1,000 target. So just wanted to give a shout out to Rachel for organising all of that. Can I ask, have you all enjoyed the session? Give me a thumbs or a thumbs down. That's good. I can see a few smiley faces out there. Have we any outstanding questions, Rachel?
Well, I started writing some bits down, and then it got a bit more scrawly as I had more beer. So I don't think we've got anything specific. I think we've sort of covered them as we've gone, unless anybody has anything particularly burning right now. I think the One Trick Pony was interesting because I think people that are already really into their sours maybe found it a bit floral, and it's just a really interesting beer, isn't it? There was some interesting comments popping up.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, it has been lovely to kind of e-meet you all. This is the first mass Zoom meeting I've done, so I was slightly nervous before we started that I'd just knock everything over. But I want to say massive, massive thanks to Rachel, particularly for organising all of this at such short notice when we went into lockdown. So thumbs up to you, Rachel.
Thank you. I will share I'm going to share the tasting notes, Annabel, and I'll send everyone the link to the Just Giving page. There's obviously no obligation at all, but if you want to, if you have a nice time and you are able to, we're just trying to raise some money for a good cause. So thank you very much for being here. And we're doing events until Sunday, so have a look and see if there's anything else you might want to pop up at, because you're more than welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your beers, guys. Thank you.